Hello there, Drew Hanish of Whiskey Lore. This is another whiskey tasting, and today headed to Japan to taste Kaiyo Whiskies Japanese MIZUNARA Oak, an unchill filtered whiskey that has a very interesting path before it reaches this bottle. Now, if you have listened to the Whiskey Lore, the interviews podcast, or looked back at some of the archives of the Whiskey Lore YouTube feed, you have probably run into my interview with J. Cole, who gave us a lot of the background on this particular whiskey. But I thought I would revisit it here in a shorter video so you get an idea of what this whiskey is like. Now, this is my favorite at the moment, Japanese whiskey, but that is because I haven't had a lot of Japanese whiskey. However, of the whiskeys that I've had, most of them have come from Suntory, so like Hibiki Harmony and Toki and that type of whiskey. I've also had the Nikka coffee grain whiskey, which is a corn whiskey from Japan. This whiskey is one that, as far as I understand it, it is a 100% malt whiskey, but it cannot be called a single malt because of a process called teaspooning, which is where under contractual agreements, they don't really want to disclose which distillery this came from. So they take some drops from another distillery and put it into the whiskey from this distillery, and that keeps it from being called a single malt. Now that is if there were rules for Japanese whiskey. Well, there are now, but when this bottle, I believe the rules are out, but when this bottle was produced, they were still working on those rules. So it seems like you probably could call it single malt in Japan if you wanted to, because the rules weren't quite that strict. So we are talking about a whiskey that is not going to be a malt and grain whiskey, but it is 100% single malt, or 100% malt. There you go. All right, so this whiskey does take a very interesting path into the bottle and then into your glass. Being called Japanese, it actually does spend time away from Japan, where it travels the seas for 3 months. It leaves Osaka, Japan, and I've been told it goes to Liverpool. It may go to some other places, but all in all, it spends about 3 months out on the sea. Similar to Jefferson's Oceans at Sea, the question is, how much does it impact the nose and flavor of this particular whiskey? And the thing is that this is aged in MIZUNARA oak, which is a very expensive oak and a very leaky oak. So there's a chance that they're losing some whiskey along the way while they're trying to do this aging at sea. So it's a delicate process, and you would think that this is going to be an expensive whiskey, but it's not. You can find this in the $60 range in the US, and it is widely available. And so whenever people are asking me about Japanese whiskeys to try, I love to throw this one out there because I think it hits that nice price point where the Scotch whiskey drinker can go, oh, okay, yeah, I mean, that's affordable, but it's also an interesting profile. And so I want people to get the opportunity to see that Japanese whiskey is not all floral. It doesn't, the character that I've found in the Japanese whiskeys that I've had so far, this is a much different character than the others. And as soon as I start doing the nosing and tasting, you're going to find out exactly what those differences are, because I do get some very interesting notes out of this one. So it comes with a nice little, there's a little bit of apple in there, maybe a green apple, a little bit of smoke. It is earthy, and The note I find most interesting is that smoke leads into a sweet smoked pork barbecue note. It's so nice. It's one of those things that after you kind of experience it and nose it and experience the first time, you kind of want to go back for more. So how is it on the palate? Ooh, I get pineapple. That's the first time I got pineapple out of it. There's some citrus, nice custard note comes in there. It is briny, smoky, peppery, and salty as well. I say briny and salty, basically the same. And smoky was the word I was looking for. And they all kind of happen all there in a rush. And then you're left with this nice, sweet vanilla on the finish, but also a black tea note, and that smoke and pepper are still lingering. Very long finish on that. What I love about this whiskey is its complexity and the fact that it goes more into savory notes, whereas some of the other Japanese whiskeys that I've had go more into that, trying to match Scotch, the sweeter Scotches, and the fruitier, the more floral Scotches. This actually hits much more into those meaty kinds of flavors that I like, without necessarily going into Isla medicinal territory. There may be a slight medicinal note in this, but overall, that's not, if it's there, it's very light. The nose actually got weaker after tasting it. Usually it's the opposite. Yeah, there's so much going on. It's really a whiskey you just need to pay attention to. A little bit of tannin comes in probably as it's evolving into that final long finish. But it's taken over by that really nice, sweet vanilla that comes in. And there is a little bit of that barbecue that comes on the finish as well. Fascinating whiskey. I think if you want to explore Japanese whiskey, this is one that you should put your eye towards, especially if you want to find a diversity of Japanese whiskeys. Then you can go try your Suntory products, and then you can come over and try this Kaiyo as well. Very, very interesting whiskey. If you enjoyed this video, if you've had experiences with Japanese whiskey, leave comments, click the like button. That helps people find the reviews here, and subscribe if you'd like to see more. And if you want to learn more about Kaiyo and maturing whiskeys at sea, you can either listen to the Whiskey Lore Stories podcast, where the episode about Madeira aged at sea, that is an episode that you can check out there from the beginning of season 5, or you can check out here on YouTube or on Whiskey Lore the interviews, my conversation with Jake Cole, as we talk about Kaiyo and the whole idea of aging at sea. And until next time, cheers and Slanjava.